Welcome to the Newsmakers Podcast. I'm Billy Hollowell, and this is a show where we go behind the headlines every day to bring you an interview with a pastor, entertainer, politician, or other notable news figure. And this is a show, again, it's daily, but it's based on our weekly TV show, which is also called Newsmakers. You can watch it on the CBN News channel and also on our YouTube page. And on this show, every day, we dive deep. It's a little more longer form with one of the people who you will often see on our Newsmakers show or across the CBN News platforms. On today's Newsmakers, a Christian school in Vermont is fighting back after its sports teams were removed from a statewide league. Lots of details here in this story, but it's over the gender issue. And so we're going to get into those details. We're welcoming Ryan Tucker, an attorney with the Alliance Defending Freedom. They are representing the school in this legal battle. With no further ado, here is Ryan. We have two cases we're going to be talking about today that are incredibly important cases, both different but also overlapping in some ways, dealing with religious liberty. The first involves Mid Vermont Christian School. Now, the school's basketball team, they chose last year to forfeit a game when they were forced to play against a biological male on the other team. Can you take us through what happened?
Sure. Well, the Mid Vermont Christian girls basketball team qualified for their state-sponsored sports league playoff tournament. And when they were looking at the seedings, they knew that the team that they were paired up against had a biological male who was professing to be female on the other side. And so the school reached out in advance of that, even actually before the seeding was made, and asked the State Sports Association, hey, what can we do about this? We have concerns over playing against a biological male, not just the safety and fairness aspect, but more importantly, the religious aspect. They believe that boys are boys and girls are girls, and that's the message that they instill and inculcate at their institution, at their school. And the state-sponsored sports league said no. And the school said, well, unfortunately, we're going to have to forfeit. So they forfeited the game. And as a result, the state punished them by kicking them not just obviously out of that tournament, but out of the sports association entirely. And so their girls' sports season ended, and they've been kicked out of that league, not just in girls' sports, but also in other sports as well. And they've been kicked out for several months now.
Had they been a part of the Vermont Principals Association for a long time? Was this something that, this was obviously the first time this sort of thing maybe had popped up? Do you know a little bit about that history?
Sure. It spans over 25 years. They had a great history with the VPA. Never had any issues with them. Their kids were able to participate in athletic events for, obviously a couple of decades, almost 3 decades. And so it's quite unfortunate that obviously the state decided to oust them, to take this ridiculous act, and it's really put the school in peril.
Well, as you just stated, I mean, these kids at this school now, they are not able to play in any of those sports leagues because this is the governing body for sports essentially in Vermont. So when people ask, well, what's the impact on the school? The impact on the school is that none of these kids can play any of those sports in the leagues, correct?
That's right. I mean, there are leagues that span, 5 states. There's a Christian league that doesn't have the same level of competition. The kids can go play in that, but there's nothing like playing in the state-sponsored junior sports league, really the only league in the state of Vermont that they've been competing in for all these years. And so it's a real threat, obviously, to this school, but I think it's a threat nationwide as well, as these religious schools face an ever-increasing amount of situations like this.
Well, yeah, and that's the core here, right? A lot of times when this issue is talked about, we're talking about safety of girls and in girls' sports, and that's something that came up in this case. But there's also the religious liberty aspect of this, as you are detailing here, that is incredibly important. Last year, U.S. District Court Judge Jeffrey Crawford dismissed the case when there was a challenge to this. And by the way, just to note this, and correct me if I'm wrong, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but the school tried to remedy this before going the legal route. They filed an appeal internally there with the league, correct?
That's right. That's right. They tried to remedy it before the game, before the forfeiture. They also tried to remedy it after they were kicked out. They went back to the VPA, the Vermont Principals Association, which is the sports league, several times, asking them to reconsider and to think through what they've done before they went and filed a federal lawsuit. And as you noted, the judge actually denied our request for injunctive relief. And so we've taken that denial up to the Second Circuit, the Court of Appeals that oversees cases that flow from the state of Vermont. And we're in the middle of briefing the case right now.
So you mentioned this before, but let's just talk about why this is important to everyone, not just Christian schools, right? The ability for a private school to live out its values, to operate, and especially after 25 years in a league, right? It's not as though they joined the year before and they were, it'd still be an issue legally, and they were booted out. But there's a long history there. But why is this an important case for everyone, not just a Christian school?
Yeah, we're seeing this across the nation. We see it in the Title IX context. ADF has filed several lawsuits pushing back on attempts by the Biden administration to force these issues, not just in the obviously in the religious school space, but in the public school space. We're seeing quite a bit of it. But in the religious school space, Mid Vermont strives to exemplify biblical truth, and in and through everything it does. The school won't be complicit in propagating a falsity, so the school can't, facilitate events that undermine its beliefs about sex and gender. And other schools across the U.S. Feel likewise. They have the same philosophy when it comes to issues of sexuality. And so, if a state like Vermont's able to kick out a great school like this, which, by the way, had done quite well in basketball over the years, competing at the highest of levels in state tournaments. If a state's able to do that here, there's great concern that other states might follow suit.
Yes. And I mean, this is an important case. You also have another case out in Oregon that I want to talk about today. It's a Christian ministry that helps at-risk kids. And again, this is an overlapping case dealing with religious liberty. They had been participating in a grant program at the state level, and now they've been prevented from doing so. Can you take us through a little bit of the background on that case?
Sure. I mean, this ministry's been around for really over 60 years, serving the youth in Medford, Oregon, and Southern Oregon. These are at-risk youth. These are 6 to 24-year-olds mainly. They provide mentoring, education, and support for these at-risk youth that are at risk of disengaging from school, from work, really just from the community. And so for years, they had been participating in a grant application, a grant process that the state provides. And about a year or so ago, they applied. They actually received the grant from the state. But when the state was going back and looking at the grant application, they said, well, wait a second, you didn't fully agree to, not discriminate on the basis of religion in your employment practices. And the ministry, responded back and said, well, wait a second, we require that all of our employees and volunteers, adhere to our, Christian beliefs. But apparently that was a problem for the state. So what they ended up doing, well, they rescinded that grant, which cost them $400,000 and eventually resulted in this federal lawsuit.
So this organization, Youth 715 or 715 Ministries, they're challenging this. Now, and before we get into that challenge, they had been doing this, as you said, for a few years. This had not come up before. This was not an issue. It was just sort of a sudden, hey, you can't have your statement of faith and your requirements that just came out of nowhere.
That it was a new provision that the state, new certification that the state had required. So no, it had not come up before. What's really nuts about this situation, though, is the state's saying, well, you can't discriminate based on religion. Well, at the same time that this is going on, the state is allowing other organizations that solely cater to a particular sex or a particular, color of skin. So they're sitting here allowing other organizations to really focus on a certain segment, but at the same time not allowing simply a religious institution that wants to hire religious people to be able to serve this community. And so the district court in this instance did not see it the way we did and actually dismiss the lawsuit. So we are currently at the Ninth Circuit. But what's great about our situation right now is we asked the Ninth Circuit for emergency relief and said, look, all these at-risk youth are being punished unnecessarily by the state. Will you order the state to reinstitute this grant that's damaging, the lives of these kids? And fortunately, on an emergency motion, the Ninth Circuit granted that. So right now, we were able to get back into the program. That doesn't dismiss the entire case. We're still on the throes of briefing the case, and it actually will be argued this November, just right before Thanksgiving.
It's interesting because you mentioned $400,000. That is a lot of money for a ministry. I mean, it's a lot of money in general, but in particular for a ministry like this. And it's interesting that you were able to get that relief. Now, pending this continues, obviously, even though that money has been gotten now, the next time they apply for this, if nothing changes, it's going to be the same thing, right? They're going to be told, no, you can't do this because you have this statement of faith and this requirement. So, winning this case is essential, not just for this ministry, I would assume, but also for others in the state that could find themselves facing a similar circumstance.
Absolutely. Every religious organization has the right to hire people who share their faith, and the government shouldn't be penalizing an organization just because they're religious. And so that's right. Right now, we were able to secure emergency relief at the Ninth Circuit, of all places, for them. But this case proceeds, and we want to set a precedent, send a message, because apparently the state of Oregon isn't getting it.
Let's say that money hadn't been granted, temporarily, at least that $400,000. How would that, obviously there's some implicit details based on what we've talked about here, but how many kids would that have impacted? How would that have impacted their ministry to lose that amount of money?
Well, scores up. This is a program, like I said, it's been around for 60 plus years, helping the kids in the community. So just to give a hands-on, example, they provide vocational training. They provide free housing to students who need it. This program gives kids hope and a future, as well as a safe place to spend at night. And when you don't have the right financial resources to do it, if you're not able to hire people to fill those voids, then the kids are going to be the ones that they get punished as a result.
Well, we're going to continue to track both of these stories as they unfold and as new developments come. Ryan, appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much.
That's all for today's Newsmakers podcast. Be sure to tune in for the next episode of the show, and also head over to the CBN News YouTube channel and the CBN News channel to watch Newsmakers every week. We'll see you soon.